Welcome to The Path is Always Evolving, a podcast for healing humans and curious souls. Hosted by energy healer Tenya Eichenberg and mind body specialist Eva Zobian-Wolf, this show blends science and spirit to explore real life healing, self care, and personal transformation. No fluff, no fixing, just grounded conversations that meet you where you are. Because healing isn't linear, but the path, it's always evolving. Hi, welcome to The Path is Always Evolving. I'm one of your co-hosts, Eva Zobian-Wolf. I'm a nurse, yoga therapist who uses energy healing and Vedic wisdom in working with clients and the concept of improving self-care for the purpose of stress management. My lovely co-host is
I'm Tenya Eichenberg, and I'm an energy healer and self-care coach. And I help my clients with overwhelm and burnout and anxiety and depression, but I do it on an energetic level. And then we help to incorporate some self-care techniques that are going to give them tools for a lifetime. But today's episode is kind of a follow through,
follow up.
On the last episode. And this is, do our adult children have an obligation to have a relationship with us once they move out of the nest?
Yeah,
And actually, do they really have an obligation to have a relationship with us at all, ever? But this is more around, they're leaving the nest, they're starting their own lives. And what do we do with that? How do we handle that?
What is their obligation to us, and what is our obligation to them?
Yeah. Big conversation, because we both come from families where we don't have much of a relationship with our parents, being the children, being the adult child. And there was a long time where I felt obligated to have a relationship with my parents, regardless of what was going on. And it caused a lot of stress.
Absolutely. We're coming up on Mother's Day. So when we're recording this, Mother's Day is coming up. And that has always been a triggering holiday for me, where I've had a challenging time enjoying it with my own kids because of that relationship where what is my duty, what is my obligation to a parent that didn't parent me.
I still have and this is something that I am still working through. Now, it's not, I don't know if I would call it, it would be an obligation. So I still feel obligated to send my parents Mother's Day and Father's Day cards. However, Hallmark does not always have a card to say what I really want to say, or even just a simplistic, like it takes me probably a good 10 or 15 minutes. And I know some people might think, oh my God, she's spending 10 or 15 minutes looking for a card. I spend hours or days looking for the perfect card for my mom. But I glance at the cards because I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that is simple. That is, Happy Mother's Day, I love you. That simple. And you would not believe how hard it is to find a card that simple. Even the front of the card, like, don't put any words on just Happy Mother's Day on the front is all it needs to say. It doesn't need to say you're the best mom ever. But a lot of them do. Hallmark does not have cards for estranged families.
If they had a section that says how to send a card to your narcissistic mother for Mother's Day.
Yeah.
Well, one, we don't need that because they're telling themselves how wonderful they are on their own. They've got their own version of reality they're living in. So again, it comes to obligation. Why haven't I'm talking myself out of this? I'm like, why have a narcissistic mom section in Hallmark when my obligation as an adult child is to protect my own energy and not worry about, all I can do is my own healing, my own behavior
Right.
changes. And what I really need to focus in on is, how do I be a better mom? How do I be a better parent to my three kids?
Right, exactly. Absolutely. And that is, yeah, and that is one thing that I think we both took away from our relationship with our parents was how can I how can we raise our kids differently so that when they do leave the nest, they still want to come around, they still want to be involved. But also, how do I not put on them the same kind of things that were put on us?
And I can tell you, with each kid, the oldest one got the worst version of me. The daughter got the triggered version of me, because there was a lot of times where in my interaction with her,
Mhm.
I was feeling triggered by events where I had had that same situation with my mom, and I did not always handle it from a good, kind place.
Mhm.
And my youngest was the most boisterous. He was the most um, energetic. He was the one that would yell back.
Yeah.
And so none of my kids got the current version of me.
Mm,
They got the stressed out,
right.
tired, anxious
Yeah.
ICU nurse
Yeah.
for a mom.
Yeah.
And however, I always looked at them and said, my hope for you is that you are always a better person than I am, that you are always happy, and that you are doing things because you are a kind, compassionate person, that you
Mhm.
look at other human beings for who they are, regardless of how many tattoos they have, how many piercings they have, what color their hair is, and you focus in on, are they a good person?
Yeah.
And so with that, I hope that there was enough that I said that was kind and compassionate.
Mhm.
And we do have a relationship with all three kids. So
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
somewhere in there, there was enough love that came through, and not so
Right.
much the stressed out mom that came through.
Right. Now I will say I had a relationship, and what I thought was a good relationship with my mom until probably about 2009, 2008. It's around the time that my nephew was born. And it was around the same time that um my brother and his wife were putting up boundaries
Hmm.
against my mom. And then my mom would come to me and um complain, and eventually it got to the point where it's like, can you ask your brother to do this? Can you ask if, can you ask? And I would do those things. I would, because I felt obligated to protect her.
So again, who was the parent in that relationship?
Honestly, well, me, I was. And then I did it to my daughter. And then I would, as my oldest got old enough, I would go to her, and I wouldn't say, can you talk to your nanny? Can you do this for me? It was more, um, she would hear if I, in my voice that I wasn't okay. And you were saying that, your kids got the different versions of Eva. They got the different versions of Tenya too. My oldest got the version of me that was getting to the point where she was realizing that she needed some separation from her mom, that there was some healing that she needed to do. And it really hit me when my oldest, she just told me this a few years ago, um that when she was 14, she had to make a decision on whether to continue going over to my mom's for visits or not. Because every time she'd go over, my mom would put me down or say that, your mom did this or your mom did that. And she would come home resenting me because of what my mom told her I did as a kid. And so she, at 14 years old, she made the very mature decision to stop going over there, or else she was going to be resenting me.
What a heartbreaking thing for anybody to
Yeah,
have to go through, but especially as a kid.
yeah, yeah. And so there were times when I would get off the phone with my daughter because she would be like, I'd call her and be like, I just talked to your nanny. And she'd be like, oh no, what happened? And I'd start to tell her and I'd start to cry. But that was, she got the unhealed version of me. I mean, she has the healed version of me now, or the healing version of me.
Yes.
And the twins got a little bit different versions. Like they didn't see the things that my mom would put on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a very different perspective of what our relationship, or why I have the type of relationship I have with her. And for the longest time, they didn't understand until my oldest explained to them all the things that she had seen growing up.
And I think, okay, so let's unpack that a little bit because that's something that I don't think a lot of people really truly understand. Um, the version of you that exists in somebody else's mind only exists in their mind,
Right.
right? And so, and we keep talking about this where, each of my kids got a different version of me. They got a different parent. And each of your kids got a different version of you. And even with the twins, there was probably a slightly different
Oh yeah.
version of you that
Yep.
existed in that relationship. And so when we talk about these relationships where they got this version and this version, um, in each of our kids' minds, when they look at their grandparent, they see a different version
Mhm.
than we see. And
Yeah.
each kid sees a different version of that grandparent than the other kids do.
Yep.
So for your daughter to explain, okay, here's what my version of my grandmother looks like.
Yeah.
That is a very, very mature, very well communicated process.
Yeah. Yeah. She did. She did. Yeah. My husband and I did something right. I wish I could remember what it was so I could write it down in a book.
And I always joke. Somebody asked me, actually, I got to meet one of my mentors, like one of my, okay, I don't fangirl over a lot of people, but the few people that I fangirl over, are super relevant to me. And like my science, my physiology, yoga geek,
Right.
my inner geek met one of the people that I fangirl over. I was actually sitting next to her in a lecture one day and didn't realize until she dropped something and I looked down, bent to pick something up, and I saw her name tag and I went, holy crap. Um, and so had like a huge fangirl moment with her. But we started talking and she was talking about her kids and I said, well, I've got, you know, three kids this age, this age, this age, this age. And, one's in the Navy, one's in about to finish med school, one's in college. And she goes, wow. And I'm like, yeah, all productive members of society. And she's like, how'd you do it? And I was like, fuck if I know.
I know.
I'm like, I think that they're amazing human beings in spite of having me as a mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the God's honest truth. So if any of the kids are listening to this, I love you. And yet again, I'm sorry that it took me this long to do this much healing.
Yeah. Yeah. But we
And
did it, but we had to go through all of that in order to get to this point, right? In order to get to where we are now so that we can pass on our knowledge. I tell my kids all the time. I've actually done a podcast with them so that they could give their them and my husband, their perspective on what it was like to see me going through the healing, how I am now, all that kind of stuff. So if you guys want to go back and listen to that, head over to the Metamorphosis Project podcast, and it's in the lower numbers, like between 1 and 10, I think. But our kids never stop learning from us.
Mm-mm.
They don't. And just because they're adults, we can't just write them off either. Right? So they move out, and there's a lot of talk about the obligation that adult children are supposed to have to their parents.
Why?
And well, I think it comes from our parents' generation, because they were obligated. Like, I can always remember my mom was like, we have to go home to Michigan every 2 years to see her parents, and we all had to go. And we all went until, oh gosh, probably, well, even I went until after I started having kids. And even then I would try to go every 2 years because I felt obligated to have to go.
So this is an interesting concept because, and I've said this with my son and daughter-in-law, when they first had our grandson, and they said, they apologized. We want to have a Christmas in our house. And I said to them, you absolutely should have a holiday with your child in your house the way that you want to start
Yep.
establishing those family traditions. And hey, guess
Absolutely.
what? All of these parents that are involved, we all have cars and phones and planes, and a lot of us are retired or have flexible schedules that we can come visit you.
Right.
You don't owe us a trip here to come see us on the holidays.
Yeah.
You guys are a young couple with student loans,
Yep.
a new house,
Yep.
a new baby. You don't owe us anything.
Yeah.
Like, periodically, a picture of the kid would be fabulous.
Yep.
But that is a kindness. That is a gesture of kindness. That is not an obligation. You don't owe us anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I never want my kids to feel obligated to coming to functions or events. And they have had their own discussions amongst themselves, especially with Christmas, because you guys don't know, Christmas is my thing. Christmas is my jam. And I would love for them to all come over on Christmas Day, right? Them, their spouses, their kids, that Christmas Day would be my day. But I know that there is another family that is involved. There are 2 other families that are involved. There is their in-laws, and then there's also their family, their unit. And so I have always told my kids, especially in the last couple of years, because they all have significant others. And this year will be our grandbaby's first Christmas. So we'll see how this goes. But I have told them, I don't care what day it is that we spend together and celebrate Christmas. It could be December 30th, if that is the way it works out for us to have a couple of hours with all 9 of us. I'm okay with that.
This is one of the aspects where working in the medical field actually created a different expectation.
Mm-hmm.
When we moved to Texas, the hospital where I worked had the shittiest holiday schedule. I mean, it was ridiculous. They created winter holidays, and we had to work, and especially at night, at working nights. Not only did we have specific holidays we had to work, but we had difficult to staff days. So for night shift, the night before Thanksgiving, the night of Thanksgiving, the night after Thanksgiving. Those 3 days all fell into Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
And I would end up having to work 2 of those 3 days. For Christmas, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, the day after Christmas, they're either holidays or difficult to staff days.
Yeah,
And so there was no taking vacation during the holidays. So what we ended up doing was, rather than trying to finagle with those days, we would just say, this is the day that we are spending together as Christmas, or, this time block is when we're going
right,
to do Christmas presents, and this is how we're going to do Thanksgiving. And we started our own family traditions
right.
because of that. So we
Yeah,
didn't have Thanksgiving turkey, we had Thanksgiving cabbage rolls, because those could be cooked in a crock pot and they could cook while I was sleeping.
right,
And we
right,
could make them several days in advance, and they were actually better when we did that. And so with the kids, when we say, okay, you do your holiday on your holiday whenever you want to do that, and then we will get together at a different time, and that is already an expectation for them. That's
right,
already the life that they've been living, so it's not
right.
as big of an adjustment. But for some people, the idea that, we're going to do Christmas on December 19th
Yeah.
can be a struggle.
It can't, so I have a quick story for you. So last Thanksgiving, so typically we would celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas at Thanksgiving with my parents and my brother and his family. And this year, or this past year, my aunt reached out. Since my grandmother passed away, they had not done a big Thanksgiving. And that's when we used to go to Michigan, and we would have Christmas for Thanksgiving when we go to Michigan. And so I decided that I wanted to go to Michigan to visit my extended family, my aunts and uncles that I haven't seen in since 2019, when my grandmother passed away. So that was 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. And so I asked the kids. First, I asked the kids, "Are you okay with not doing Thanksgiving? Like, do you want to go to your significant other's house for Thanksgiving? Because I'd like to go to Michigan for Thanksgiving." And they were all like, "Yeah, go. It's fine." And so and this was like 6 months before Thanksgiving. And so I reached out to my parents and my brother, and I was like, "Hey, I'm not hosting Thanksgiving this year. I'm going to Michigan." And I didn't hear anything. I think I got a thumbs up from my brother, but I really didn't hear anything from my parents. And then probably, I don't know, 3 months later, my mom's like, "Well, can we do Christmas at your house on the 21st?" It's like, "Sure, sure." And then about 2 weeks later, we all got letters, like these, pre-printed letters that my mom made, that said that this Christmas was going to be at our house on this date at this time because she deserves it. I was all okay with it until I got the letter that said she deserves it. So it really put a different taste
Mandatory
on
fun.
Christmas. Yeah, yeah. It
For
really
the
put it
military folks, that being voluntold.
exactly. Exactly. So yeah, so I still struggle with the obligation with my parents, but I don't pass it on to my own kids.
That is and each kid has their own relationship with grandparents, with us. Um, we have always told the kids, there is always space for you here. If you
Yep.
need, whatever happens, you need to come stay with us. And they always joke, and they're like, we know, but not forever.
Right.
And then one of the things that we have, you don't have to call us every day. You don't have to text us all the time. You don't have to, send Christmas cards. You don't have to buy us presents. The only thing that we ask is, you know, you live a good life. And it is our job
Mhm.
to call you, text you, and just say hi, keep up with you guys.
Yeah.
It is as much our job as it is yours in this relationship because we're now adults. You are now adults. You have your own
Yeah.
family. We are now the extended family.
Yep.
And treating them as adults and saying, you know what's best for you and your family
Mhm.
is a big aspect of that. And one of the things that me and my husband have done is because two of the kids live several states away, he is still teaching and is constricted to teacher vacations.
Right.
And so Thanksgiving and Christmas, we go camping
Yeah.
because, and we'll invite our youngest son. Hey, we're going to go camping. If you and your significant other want to come camping with us, you're more than welcome. We're going camping. Here's where we're going to be. We're going to do holiday on this day. If you want to come in, what works for your schedule, let's do
Right.
holiday together.
Right.
Um, but then it's okay, we're going to see you at other times, right? So right now we're planning a vacation a year from now
Mhm.
when our daughter graduates from school
Yeah.
and planning how we're all going to get together and celebrate that time. And we rented an Airbnb so that we could all be together in one space, cook meals, sit and have coffee together, play games, celebrate what's going on with her. Um, those are the things that we have established are important to us. Spending time together.
Mhm.
And it doesn't
Right.
have to be on a specific day. It doesn't have to be at a specific time.
Right.
Um, and I really hope that we haven't instilled in the kids that they owe us because I still, you talked about this, I still see that coming from, I only have one parent that's still alive. And my husband's parents both passed away right before COVID, actually. They passed away within a couple months of each other. She passed
Mhm.
away in November, October, end of October, and he passed away New Year's Eve.
Mhm.
And so uh, in the relationship between my son, my oldest son, and his grandmother, it is a very, very different dynamic.
Mhm.
And that she still brings out a lot of her not fabulous personality quirks.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not sure that my parents reach out to my kids much at all. I think my parents think that it's there, and I may be wrong. Maybe that's a conversation I need to have with my parents. Like, what do you think? Who do you think needs to be doing the reaching out? Because my parents are not the ones who reach out, and we have so many different ways of communication these days. Phone call,
Absolutely.
email, text messaging, video call,
Oh my gosh.
snail mail. We still have snail mail. I mean, you can still
Yep.
send a pigeon and a smoke signal if you wanted to,
Yep.
right? If anybody understands how to read those things. But, you know, I, I don't hear from my parents very often unless I call them.
There was a line that was crossed for me in that the personality that I saw, the version that was exposed to me, was very different than the version that was exposed to that interacted with
Mhm.
other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of cruelness, a lot of viciousness was directed at me for many, many years, but never to anybody else.
Right. Right.
And in one situation, that viciousness was acknowledged and exposed and happened in front of two of my children and my husband. And that was the last straw for me. I was done.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's one thing for you to be horrible and nasty to me. You cannot be horrible and nasty to my kids.
Yeah.
And that, much like your daughter at 14, my daughter, that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
And she feels under, and again, we've talked about this before, she is fantastic at establishing those boundaries and saying, what is my obligation to this person? What is this my obligation to this person? And every time it's brought up, she's like, nope, I have no obligation. The phone works both ways and the phone has never rung on my end. So
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. There is the way I see it, parents are obligated to keep the relationship going with their kids, barring there's no abuse coming from the kids, because there are those types of relationships as well. So, these are your typical, normal, everyday relationships,
healthy relationships,
healthy
yes.
relationships. I think it is up to the parent to keep that communication open.
So with that, we talked about this in a different episode where we talked about the difference between big P and little p parent. And one of the reasons that we extended into this conversation was because how we interact with our kids and recognizing them as an adult and not a child that is now 28 or 32, that we
Right.
have to tell them how to live their life, and when we think they're making a mistake or what they should be doing. And instead just saying, you know what, my role is now different and I'm going to take a step back.
Yep.
That's one of the ways that we really initiate and really have that obligation, is I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to recognize you as an
Yep.
adult,
Yep.
and I'm a support system now.
Yep. Exactly. And that's how it worked with my in-laws. And I always tell my husband, I want to be your parents. I love my in-laws to death. I mean, they gave us space to grow, and they helped us when we needed it. And that's what we're doing for our kids.
What a phenomenal example. What a great way to model.
Yeah. And I do still sometimes find my mom's patterns, my parents' patterns, or obligation patterns kind of creep in. And I have to stop and go, whoa, wait a minute. What am I wanting to say? And what is this other part of me wanting to say? So,
Right.
and I
Because
think
we
that happens with each stage of life.
absolutely, and this is part
Right.
of that evolving,
Yeah.
that we do the best we can
Yeah.
until we learn where our patterns are, um where we're holding
Yeah.
the stuff that wasn't ours, where somebody said you're supposed to do it this way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So in closing, our kids don't owe us anything. They don't.
They do not. And this
When
is
you
going to
take when
be
you take the fact that, their souls did choose us as parents, when you take that out of the equation, they don't they didn't choose to be here. Right? They didn't choose to, and this is because, and I say this in this way because those listening that are not familiar with the soul contracts that we have when we come into this human existence, you know, even if we planned on having our kids, they did not plan on our patterns. They didn't plan on our traumas. They didn't plan on our obligations to our parents. So you want to have a healthy relationship with your kids. Just have a relationship with them. Let them grow. Let them make their mistakes. Let them learn from them. 99% of the time, they're not going to do anything that's going to hurt them or anybody else. And if you can be there to help them with a lesson. Help them, give them just enough help that they still need to pitch in and help themselves.
And, one of the things that we can do too is ask. A lot of times we don't have to be a voice in the conversation. We just need to be a presence.
Right.
And practicing active listening and
Yep.
asking, is this something you want help with? Is this something you want advice on?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a term that I'm trying to use, but really it's taking some time for me to be vulnerable enough to ask people. Right. But when they come to you and they're talking to you about their problem, it's, do they want to be helped? Do they want to be hugged, or do they just want to be heard?
Are you using those exact words?
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. That's still a part of me that is like, ooh, this might sound funny. But that's me. That's stuff that I still have to address. And I understand that.
And that's an important distinction, because the issues that we have, one of my yoga mentors, one of her favorite sayings is, we're all here on Earth School.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to learn our lessons. We arrived as a human being to learn our lessons.
Yep.
And we each have our own assignments.
Yeah.
Our kids have their own assignments. Our assignment is to grow and evolve as our own person, to see our, in the yoga world, we call them shadows. We're to see where our lessons lie, where we're supposed to see things and grow and evolve. That's our own work. Nobody can do that work for us.
Yeah.
And we can't do that work for our kids as much as we want to. Part of being a parent is letting them have that experience.
Letting them fail and grow.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yep. All right, well, we've reached the end of this episode, and I'm sure there will be many more episodes where we're talking about our adult children and how we manage life with them and without them. So come back next week, and next week we're going to be talking about guilt on not being perfect. So make sure you come back next week to hear that episode. We'll see you later.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.